Hey guys, welcome to the fifth video of a series of videos that are dealing with the brand new Dark Elf Army book. So in this book, I'll be looking at three different types of lists that you could potentially build from this. Obviously, these are not the only lists that you can build. It's not, inclusive, and there are other builds that probably will come out as people play the book. But these are the three that I see coming out of this book at the moment without having play tested it. So there's the combat infantry formation, the monster mass formation, and the defensive infantry formations. So we're going to start with combat infantry. So what you're going to have here is your general is going to be a supreme sorceress. She's going to have the sacrificial dagger with the talisman of preservation. Now she's going to be hiding in a bunker of corsairs that she will be picking off for extra power dice. I recommend preservation because it's a 4+ ward save, unless you're running lore life. Now, the lores I would use are Shadow, because it debuffs your opponent, so getting extra, or reducing their strength, reducing their weapon skill, reducing their toughness, all help you in close combat. I really am a fan of Lore Beasts. I think 4 of their spells work really well. Wiston's Wild Form +1 strength and toughness is great on anything. Savage Beast of Horus works well on your BSB. Turning your Death Hag into... She has 5 attacks at strength 4 base, giving her 8 attacks at strength 8 with rerolls to hit is pretty good. Now, Dark Magic also works. I mean, they're more direct damage spells, but there are a couple of hexes that will help you in close combat, and a couple of buffs, such as the +1 strength buff, that will help you as well. And then, of course, there's always Lore of Life. I think if you run Life, again, you don't need the 4+ ward save because you'll be regrowing wounds. But I think Life is boring, and it's very easy to play with, and also easy to play against. But it does work in this type of list. Making your infantry toughness 7 is always nice. Now, as a backup caster in this list, you can either have a level 2 Scroll Caddy, or you can take the Fast Cap Warlocks. Now, I've talked about the benefits and drawbacks of each of these in previous videos. If you take the Scroll Caddy, I recommend Dark Magic, because the 2 signature spells there work well. Beast is always nice. Again, getting an easy Wiston's Wild Form, I think that's going to help you in every situation, and Shadow for the same reason. You can reduce strength, toughness, and weapon skill, which will help your guys survive. That's the biggest thing with the combat infantry list. All your guys are toughness 3 and 5+ armor save. So you need your magic to help augment that to make sure that you're not going to die in droves when the enemy strikes back, which is why I've recommended the lores that I have here. Now, your BSB in this list is going to be a Death Hag BSB on the Cauldron of Blood. I would give her the standard of swiftness so that the unit that she's in is movement 6, so they will get into combat faster. I wouldn't go with any of the gifts. You can do that, but they just make her more expensive, and she's very likely to die. She's only toughness 3 with 2 wounds. She does have a 5 ward save from the Cauldron, but I don't expect her to live more than 2 rounds of combat. But I would still take her. Now, for your core choices, I would use a Corsair bunker of 20 guys, give them full command with the standard of discipline. Now, the reason why you give them a champion is in case some other character charges into your bunker and wants to assassinate your mage, you can challenge that character out with your champion and save your mage for 1 turn. And it'll also prevent your guys from, dying in droves. If a big monster gets in, all they can do is 1 wound to you. Now, for the rest of your core, you have 2 choices. I prefer Dark Riders and Repeater Crossbows for the reasons I discussed in my core video. Now, I like Dark Riders because they're very fast. They get a 4+ armor save, which is pretty cool for fast cav and makes them a little bit more durable. And these guys are perfect War Machine Hunters. You can use them as redirectors, but they get a bit expensive for that. Now, and then I would fill out the rest of the core with Repeater Crossbows, because 1, these will counter shoot. Your infantry is toughness 3 with 5+ armor saves, and sometimes they'll get a 6+ ward save. So you want to shoot whatever's shooting them before they get into close combat. And they can also shoot redirectors. So things like the saber tusks or harpies or anything like that, anything that's going to try to frenzy bait your cauldron and make them overrun in a very, very bad way where you're potentially exposing your flank, you shoot those things before they can do that. Ensures that your cauldron's going to hit something that it actually wants to hit and is not going to be redirected by chaff the entire game. Now, the alternative to this is taking witch elves and putting them in the cauldron. Now, again, in the core video, I discussed this. Why I'm not in favor of this, because I think the special choices in this list are better. And I think, yes, witch elves get a ton of attacks with rerolls to hit and rerolls to wound, but strength 3 at the end of the day does not cut through armor, and they're going to have difficulty, again, in certain matchups. Whereas Blackguard or Executioners with the Cauldron are not going to have those issues. Which brings us to my next point. In this army, the backbone of your army will be Blackguard and Executioners. The Blackguard themselves should be pushing the Cauldron, and I would equip them with the Razor Standard, so they're Strength 4 Armor Piercing. If you get a +1 Strength buff on them, either through Wissons or Power of Darkness, they're Strength 5 Armor Piercing. They're going to cut through everything. They have rerolls to hit, and the 6 of Ward Save from the Cauldron will help them survive just a little bit more. So I recommend that you use these guys to push the Cauldron and have a horde of Executioners in support. Executioners are obviously in the list because they are the only thing that can easily kill cavalry and monsters. Now, you should have a fair amount of drops, so you should be able to place them well. So you obviously want to place them against other people's monsters, cav, other cav, etc. Now, to support this army, you can have small units of Shades and or Cold One Knights. I would recommend units of 6 Cold One Knights to maybe get the drop on a monster. They're generally faster than monsters that walk, slower than flying monsters, so you can get the charge off. You get 6 strength 6 attacks with rerolls to hit, so you should be doing damage. And you're not, monsters themselves can't thunder stomp you, and your 2-up armor save should save you against a lot of the wounds they do, so these guys are potential monster hunters. Now the Shades, I would give them great weapons, and they come with repeater crossbows. I mean, you can either deploy them behind something and shoot, or you can run into war machines and hack them apart. 1 or 2 bolt throwers are also recommended. Again, this is to deal with flying monsters that you're not going to be able to catch very easily. And I would use 2 or 3 units of Harpies in this list, and I would keep all of those units behind your Cauldron of Blood. And the reason for this is, like I talked about in another video, in the special video when I talked about Harpies, you can use these guys when you charge your Cauldron of Blood in. If you know you're on a bad overrun path, move your Harpies in front of the Cauldron of Blood so that when they overrun, they run directly into them. So essentially they don't move because they bounce an inch backwards, which will prevent you from getting a terrible flank charge by your opponent in the next turn and could potentially save your giant Death Star. So again, units of Harpies are recommended in this list. So this is the combat infantry list. It's very aggressive and based on infantry. It deals, so it should be able to outfight most things, and it has units that can deal with other threats as well. Now the next list we're going to talk about is the Monster Mash. So this should be pretty obvious what this consists of. I recommend a Supreme Sorceress on a Pegasus with a Scroll and the Cloak of Twilight. Obviously you can't use the Dagger in this list because she's going to be flying around on her own. The lures I recommend are Shadow, Beasts, Light, and Dark Magic. Now, what's happening here is you essentially have an MSU list, so you have many monsters. So Beast is alright, but what you really want are lures with hexes, because you're going to be sending multiple monsters into single blocks. Now, if you cast a buff spell, you're only going to be buffing one of your 3 or 4 monsters that's going to be going into that block. Whereas if you cast a hex spell, the block that those 3 or 4 monsters are fighting, that block gets reduced. So hex spells are infinitely more valuable than buff spells in this case. So that's why I like Lure Shadow, dropping people's strength, toughness, weapon skill. That's going to be useful. Beasts can be good because this list does have a Cold One bus in it, so you can boost the cold one buff, or boost one of your monsters that needs it more. Light works. It is a bit more risky, and the reason why I like light is because on normal elves, it kind of does what they already do well, which is high initiative, rerolls to hit, high weapon skill. But light, the monsters in this list don't have that. So light can buff these monsters very well, and the other reason why I like light is because all their spells can become bubble spells. So you fly your Pegasus into around your army and you cast the larger bubble version of the spell. This is more risky and you are more likely to miscast and lose your mage. But it can buff 4 or 5 Hydra, or 3 Hydras, a cold one boss, and 2 of the other big monsters, or a couple of flying Manticores. Now, obviously, the alternative to the Supreme Sorceress is the Dreadlord on a Dragon, which is obviously a super killy monster, but then you're really losing out on your magic phase. In bigger games, I think 2500 plus, you should also be able to fit in a Beastmaster on a Manticore. He might be slightly bare bones, so maybe we're looking at 3000 points, but he's a cool, fluffy addition to this type of list as well. You can also throw in regular Masters on Manticores. So again, just getting more flying monsters in there. As your secondary casters, I recommend units of 5 or 6 Warlocks. 1 or 2 units of these is very nice, mostly because you're lacking in ranged attacks, so Doombolt can deal some damage to units that you're going to have trouble catching. And Soul Blight is obviously really good as well, reducing strength and toughness on a unit that you're going to multi-charge is a big help. I would recommend a Master BSB on a cold one. Obviously, give him the Sea Dragon Cloak and heavy armor. I prefer the Halberd. In my core video, in my character video, the first video I did in the series, I discussed more of the builds for the Master, so any one of those will work. So check that video out if you want to see specifics on his build. Now, for your core, I would go nothing but Dark Riders here. So I would go 2 units with shields. These are going to be your dedicated War Machine Hunters. You could throw in a 3rd unit. And then I would give the rest shields and crossbows because this list lacks shooting. And this will help you deal with chaff that might get in the way of your monsters. Again, your flying monsters are not flying, so they could... you could throw an eagle in front of them or something else that you don't want to fight. Hopefully having enough crossbows can deal with all these annoying redirectors. So that's going to do that. Now, for your special, obviously you want to max out on Hydras. And you want 11 cold. You want a bus of 11 cold one knights with full command and the standard of swiftness, and 1 or 2 units of harpies to either redirect things you don't want to fight or get rid of other people's redirectors. In your rare choices, I would recommend 2 Carabadisses. These guys are like Hydras, but with higher strength. They should be going after other people's monsters or things with a 1+ armor save. You can throw in Medusas. It's going to be harder to control them in this game. Their shooting attacks are very useful, but you really need to keep them next to the general, otherwise they're just going to fail charge or charge something that you don't want them to charge. So those are optional in this type of list. Then there's the 3rd type of list is the defensive infantry. So this one is led by a Supreme Sorceress, and you would either give her the Dagger or Scroll and Talisman of Preservation for the 4+ ward save. I really like Dark Magic in this build because Dark Magic has a lot of hexes, but it does tons of damage. It does tons of direct damage and magic missile spells, so it really complements the rest of the list. So the idea behind this list is you shoot, 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 magic, 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 and try to take off as many wounds as possible before they get to you. Again, it's a gun line. Shadow works as well because dropping people's toughness by D3 helps your repeater crossbows a lot. Your crossbows could go from wounding on 5s to 2s, which is a big, big deal, and that helps. And then there's also Lore of Heavens, which is going to allow you to reroll 1s when you're shooting, which is nice. As well as a couple of direct damage spells in there that will help as well. Comet, Chain Lightning, these types of spells You can whittle opponents down. If you put a comet in the board and his army has to walk into it to get to you, that's always a plus. I would also recommend a level 2 on a Pegasus, and I would give her Dark Magic and just have her fly around and cast magic missiles all game. Just hopefully she doesn't get caught. And I would give her the Cloak of Twilight to give her the 3+ ward save against any type of shooting and magical attacks, so that should help her out as well. Then I would take a Master BSB on foot. For specifics, please see my characters video. It's the first video in the series. There's a ton of options on there. This guy can get a 1-up rerollable very quickly, so he's very survivable. If you don't want to give him an armor save, you can always hide him in the bunker. Now for your core, I would obviously recommend repeater crossbows, because again, this is a shooting list. A Corsair bunker is optional. I would give them full command with the standard of discipline. If you're going to use it, I recommend it when you take the dagger, because you don't want to be stabbing your crossbowmen. The Corsair bunkers, they're cheaper wounds. And a unit or two of Dark Riders with or without the crossbows, but always take shields. These guys can act as harassment or deal with enemy war machines. If your Dark Riders can take out his war machines turn 2, you will win the shooting fight. Now in special, I recommend Executioners. You need at least one big block that can fight, and Executioners will be able to kill what your shooting can't. I mean, you could go Blackguard, but I really like the Strength 6 on Executioners just in case, because it's harder to shoot things with higher armor saves. And essentially, Blackguard are good at killing things that your repeater crossbows will have shot to death anyway, so that's why I would go with Executioners. Obviously, you want 4 repeater bolt throwers, because again, it's a shooting list. 3 units of Shades. Deploy these guys behind their lines and just shoot away. 3 units of Harpies to redirect big things and delay stall. And then in rare, you can have 2 Medusas, because I think their shooting attacks are pretty good against certain builds, especially big monsters. They can one-shot Hydras amazingly, provided the Hydra's already taken some wounds, but they complement your shooting pretty well, so that's what the defensive list looks like. I think it could be pretty solid, but it's kind of boring, but I think it will win more games than it loses. Then, of course, there is the balance build, which takes a little bit from each list. And this is a toolbox build. It's got an answer to every single question. It's a jack of all trades. You're going to see a mix of monsters, shooting, fast things, slow things. It really, I wouldn't recommend this list, but you know, it's probably the easiest to play with. It's the most forgiving. So that pretty much wraps it up. Hopefully you guys learned something, and let me know if you agree or disagree with anything I said. And obviously this is not an inclusive list. There are other builds that are going to emerge, but these are the 4 that I could think, or that I thought of before actually having played with the new book. Hope you guys enjoyed it.